Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start by thanking my colleagues who have been leading this effort with me from the beginning, Senator Grassley, Senator Ernst, Senator Blumenthal, who have been steadfast partners and the real champions behind the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act. Senator Grassley, in particular, has been at this for nearly a decade with me. From the beginning. Senator Blumenthal has been a true leader in this struggle, never letting go of this issue. And Senator Ernst's perspective and voice as both a former commander, the only Republican female former commander in the Senate, as well as a sexual assault survivor, gives her not only unique authority on this issue, but has been extraordinarily helpful in not only improving and updating the bill, but building support over the last year. This year's NDAA contains many important provisions that will help us modernize our armed services and support our service members who give so much to this country. And it's a product of hard work that was done in a bipartisan manner. I want to particularly acknowledge the good work done by the members on this stage to ensure that provisions on prevention and provisions to help survivors of sexual assault be included in this year's NDAA. It includes Senator Ernst's provision to improve the physical security on bases, something that was sorely lacking and much needed. And it includes a provision we fought to allow survivors to call the Safe Helpline to report crimes so they do not have to do so in person. While there's no doubt that those are important advances, this bill does not reform the military justice system in a way that will truly help survivors get justice. It does not remove serious crimes out of the chain of command, which is the only way to create the professional, unbiased system that we've been advocating for, that survivors, veterans organizations, constitutional experts, and the IRC, the Independent Review Commission, have called for. To quote Secretary Austin's own panel, the DOD's Office of the Special Victim Prosecutor structure must be seen as independent of the chains of command of the victim and the accused all the way through the secretaries of the military departments. Anything less will likely be seen as compromising what is designed to be an independent part of the military justice process. But under this NDAA, the commander remains the convening authority, a central role to the military justice system. Every single court-martial will still begin with the words, "This court-martial was convened by order of the commander." Commanders can still pick the jury, select the witnesses, grant or deny witness immunity requests, order depositions, and approve the hiring of expert witnesses and consultants. And they can also continue to allow service members accused of crimes the option of separation from service instead of facing court-martial, a total denial of justice. When the commander is so deeply involved in a case, there's no independence for the prosecutor, and there's no perception of independence for the accused or the accuser. Dividing these responsibilities further between the commander and the prosecutor will add layers of bureaucracy, slowing the process down and making it longer for survivors to seek justice and to see justice. These reforms also fail to draw a bright line at all serious non-military crimes. That bright line is critical because it's what helps avoid creating the so-called pink courts, focused solely on sex crimes, which only further stigmatizes survivors, something survivors have specifically asked us to avoid doing. Drawing that bright line also avoids creating an inherent inequality in the military justice system. Every victim and accused offender in these serious cases should be treated equally and have access to a system that is both professional and unbiased. The majority of our colleagues have recognized that. Our bill has the support of a bipartisan filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and a majority in the House. But the will of those members was ignored in the NDAA where committee leaders stripped out reforms from the bill behind closed doors, despite assurances that they would follow regular order. A problem as serious as this one deserves serious consideration. Every member should be able to cast their vote on this bill. We will continue to call for a floor vote on the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act, so the voices of our colleagues, of our service members, and especially survivors are not silenced. The good news is that both Majority Leader Schumer and Speaker Pelosi support not just this bill, but having a standalone vote on it. So there is a path forward, and we will keep taking it. I now would like to bring up Senator Grassley, our Republican lead.
Thank you. I'm going to take off where Senator Gillibrand left off. I'm going to comment more on the process in the United States Senate. We have seen the power structure of the United States Senate interfere with the goals of 2/3 of the United States Senate with the changes made to the Gillibrand bill. Since 2013, Senator Gillibrand and I and others have fought the status quo in the military justice system. For too long, we have been told the status quo would change. Well, guess what? The status quo has not changed. When members of our military are sexually assaulted, they aren't getting the justice they deserve. It's shameful, and that's why 2/3 of the United States Senate got behind the work of Senator Gillibrand over the last 8 years. So 8 years later, our bipartisan bill has garnered 66 co-sponsors. It's incredibly rare, almost a supermajority making a point on any subject in the United States Senate. But our point against sexual assault with 66 members is abundantly clear, not clear enough to the power structure of the United States Senate. Yet the decision makers on the defense bill still on this subject don't want to go far enough to bring the justice that sexual assault victims deserve. They've gutted our sexual assault provisions. After 8 years, we all ought to be sick and tired of foot dragging on this subject and interference of the power structure of the United States Senate with the judgment of 66 members of the United States Senate. But as Senator Gillibrand has explained to you, we're not going to give up until this job is done. There's too much at stake.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Senator Ernst.
Thank you, everyone. I served as a commander in the military, and I am a survivor of sexual assault. And this is a very important issue to me. And as we say in the military, I'm going to give you the bottom line up front, our bluff. We wouldn't be where we are today without the tremendous leadership of my friends, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Grassley, and Senator Blumenthal. We've made some really, and I'll quote, momentous steps forward, as retired Colonel Don Christensen, the former chief prosecutor of the United States Air Force and the president of Protect Our Defenders, said yesterday. From the prevention efforts, including education and greater security on our military bases, to the independent special trial counsel, we really have made some progress, taking steps forward that I do support. And that's because of the years of persistence of my colleagues. I am disappointed that we did not get every aspect of our bill included, and we should have the ability to do that. In part, this is due to the broken National Defense Authorization Act process we saw this year. We should have been on this bill much, much earlier so that we could have a robust debate about the extremely important issues, especially the one of sexual assault and military justice reform. The Senate Armed Services Committee passed our bill in the Senate NDAA in its entirety. We have the support of over 65 senators, a veto-proof majority. We should have a standalone vote on the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act. And I hope that at this point we can recognize that we have seen a number of momentous steps forward, very critical steps forward, and we have made this year's NDAA to prevent. We've made it so far in this year's NDAA so that we can help prevent sexual assault and hold accountable those who commit such atrocities against our service members. But we still have a long ways to go. So I am so grateful, Senators Gillibrand and especially Senators Grassley and Blumenthal as well for their great leadership. Again, I want to stress that over and over. The commitment that they have had through the years and making sure we get this over the finish line is laudable and it's commendable. So we've made a lot of progress. Probably some of the most important progress, most momentous progress that we have seen ever in our history of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. But we still have a number of steps to go, and we'll continue that fight. Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks. Senator Ernst is absolutely right. This measure represents a lot of progress. I think back to the earliest days, 10 years ago, when I was involved with Senator Gillibrand, and there was an implacable wall of opposition to taking sexual assault out of the chain of command. And she was relentless and tireless. And this measure alone constitutes progress, but it's nowhere near enough. And that's why we need a standalone vote. As a former prosecutor, this system makes no sense. Crimes related to sexual assault are left in the chain of command. So prosecuting a lesser crime for sexual assault is impossible here in the same consistent way as would prevail in the civilian system. For someone who's been a prosecutor, it makes no sense. For a military commander focused on military readiness, it makes no sense. Look at the burden that is left with the commander. This is the NDAA, a list of time-consuming and burdensome tasks that remain with the commander under the NDAA, as opposed to our act that makes it much more expeditious, less costly, and burdensome and time-consuming. Military commanders, I think, will ask for a better system, and we're going to give it to them. We need a standalone vote, and we need to continue the job, get it done, and make sure that our military as well as our justice system are well served.
Senator Grassley has a pre-existing commitment, so we'll answer questions if you have any.
All right, for all three of you. Are you going to vote for the NDAA today? Because even though this is not part of the legislation?
I think everyone has probably a different answer on that, but I will be voting no. I'm assuming you're voting
I'll
yes.
vote yes.
And I will vote yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're voting no because?
Of this.
So just to clarify, is your game plan to call for a vote entirely separate from the NDAA, or because this isn't actually a conference report and you can call for an amendment vote if you wanted to? Is that your?
No, the amendment process is fixed in, so I will be calling for an up or down vote. And we have precedent for that. When we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there was opposition by members to vote with it in the NDAA, so they separated it out, and it was ultimately repealed in an individual up or down vote. So we have precedent for taking especially issues of significance out of the NDA and doing it separately.
We do have a 115 UC to that if you wanted to.
which will be objected to.
If you get that up or down vote, would it like supersede what's
Yes.
in the NDA, or would it like work with like how you were talking
Well, so everything in the NDA is fine. This would just correct the pieces that need to be corrected. So, for example, the NDA only takes out 11 crimes. Our bill takes out 38 crimes. The NDAA doesn't remove convening authority from the commander. Our bill will remove convening authority from the commander. But the Special Victims Council work as a specialized training of counsels to become expert in sex crimes, which is fine and very complementary to what we built in the Military Justice Improvement and Prevention Act.
Do you have any sense of why this was stripped out during conference, or what the specific issues that came up during conference about it?
The DOD opposes it. They want the reform to be as minimal as possible. They prefer the status quo.
You've been calling for UC for, countless times over the past couple of months. How do you change that dynamic? I mean, you're going to probably run into arguably the same roadblock, won't you?
Right. The point of asking unanimous consent for a vote is to elevate the issue so my colleagues, the Senate, and my state understand why I am dissatisfied with the particular language in the NDAA and why it's important for survivors, for the veterans community, for 29 attorneys general, for 220 House members and 66 senators that we get an opportunity to be heard on this issue. And the NDAA is a highly complex, extremely complex document. And these issues of criminal justice are also extremely complex. Most people don't understand what a convening authority is and how much power it has and what the perception of military members have of the convening authority. And so when the convening authority is resting in the hands of the commander and the first word the trial judge says is this court-martial is convened by Commander so-and-so, it sets the tone, and that prosecutor has to ask permission for a whole host of things that, again, keeps the power in the hands of the commander. So if you're a survivor who believes that the commander's never going to believe you or take you seriously, you may not ever report because the commander's still in charge. So that's the whole point of wanting to take this out of the chain of command, was so that survivors would come forward, report these cases, and also for the civil rights and social justice issues, for commanders who may well be biased, you want to have defendants' rights protected as much as plaintiffs' rights, especially for serious crimes when penalties are over a year or more. So the whole point is to have a better, more professionalized military justice system so everybody gets a better system of justice. Yep. Anything else on this topic for either?
Related on the draft.
Oh, yeah, sure. We're very upset about that, too.
What is your reaction to that?
We're upset. Yes. So the purpose of what's it called? Selective service. The purpose of selective service is so that in a time of national emergency, that people who are needed can be called up immediately to help the American people be safe and secure under any national emergency. And to say only men are needed in that moment of a national emergency is outrageous and obscene. And standing next to a former military commander, it's exceedingly outrageous. And so women and men should be required to file for selective service when they turn 18, so that, God forbid, there's a national emergency, all able-bodied individuals are called up to help at that moment. And it's a slap in the face to every service member who is female, who has put their life on the line for this country, because it's a backhanded way of saying your service isn't necessary. We don't expect to have a draft in this country ever. We want to have an all-volunteer force. But what the selective service means is an ability to be called up at a time of grave need. And you should speak to this. Come to the microphone.
I would say ditto to that, and I am in support of women being required to register for selective service. We have fought so long and hard to be treated as equals when it comes to the combat arms. And roughly 6 years or so ago, combat arms were open to females. As long as you meet the standard required by that branch of service, you should be allowed to participate. Because we are asking for equal opportunity within the military structure, we also should expect that of our young women across the United States. And God forbid that we ever have a draft again. We hope that never, ever happens. I want to continue to see a strong all-volunteer force, but to think that we would only send women picked by the draft to the front lines to fight in infantry units. I think that's what a lot of America thinks of when they think about the draft. But I know full well that a woman could certainly, although she could choose to serve in the infantry if she met the standard, she could also choose to serve in a cyber unit where she is sitting behind lines where she's safe, but certainly working to disrupt the enemy. All of these jobs are important.
Yeah.
And
she might be a pilot. She might be
she can
a doctor. She might be
yes.
The military has every
She
job
could be
under the sun. And
she
so,
could be a truck driver.
Yeah, she could be doing supply chain, which Joni's an expert on.
But yeah, so we're disappointed.
And we need more
We're
of all those
disappointed.
skills. We need more of them. But let me make a larger point
Yeah,
about
please, Richard.
about the process. You know, these two provisions are among quite a number that have just disappeared after we voted for them. And it wasn't just kind of a snap judgment. We actually, on the Armed Services Committee, we sit for days, literally full days, behind closed doors, deliberating, debating all of these provisions. The justice provisions of the NDAA are the result of lengthy and elaborate conversation, debate within our committee.
And hearings. Multiple
and hearings.
over many years.
So the question really is, what happened? What happened to the democratic process here? And for me, it emphasizes the importance of the vote we take at the beginning of every armed services markup. We close the doors. Now, I have voted consistently to keep those doors open. The argument always is, oh, you know, it reduces the time necessary for debate. It's, you know, we don't have to go selectively into confidential or classified settings for one issue or another. But here's the result, that the American people aren't seeing the deliberative process. And so I think there's a need for more transparency so the American people understand the reasons why we wanted these provisions in the bill and why the vote was overwhelmingly bipartisan in favor of them. This is not a partisan issue, as you gathered here. None of these issues we've been discussing or the others that were deleted from the bill were kind of partisan party line votes. They were really the result of consensus.
Since the whim of the chairman and the ranking member.
Apparently.
There was a report that the selective service provision was traded for the military justice reforms that did get into the bill. Is that your understanding of what happened?
We wouldn't know because that
We're not part
happened
of that trading.
somewhere else.
We can speculate like you, but we weren't there. We weren't in the room.
And if that's the case, that's an outrage since since the military justice provisions that were included were extremely limited.
And this is not we're not here to criticize the chairman or the ranking member. It's the process really that maybe needs some review.
Senator Gillibrand, I mean, when I spoke to you previously, you said basically
Yeah, thanks, Joni. Take care.
it's going to come down to the 4 people in the room that are going to determine whether or not this gets in the bill.
Yes.
So was it them or was it the DOD?
Well, I think it's the 4 people in the room that make the decision. But the DOD is extremely effective in misleading members of Congress, in writing language for staff, in assuring members that when it says the special victims prosecutors are independent and their decisions are binding, that somehow convening authority doesn't mean anything. It's shocking that members of Congress wouldn't realize that makes those words of independent and binding irrelevant and meaningless, because the convening authority has the authority over so many aspects of the trial. So I don't know who's responsible, but I know that the 4 corners of the conference committee have the ultimate authority and decision-making power. And whether they were misled or don't fully understand it or just intentionally don't like these reforms, those are questions you have to ask them.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.